Some women command attention the moment they walk into a ballroom. She didn't. The first time I saw her, she was covered in dust, gripping a training sword and arguing with a warrior twice her size. Everyone was watching the fight. I was watching her. It was strange, because I shouldn't have noticed her at all. She wasn't a lady of the court. She didn't come from a powerful family. She didn't carry an important name. She was just a woman in the guard. At least, that's what everyone said. But every time I saw her walking through those halls, every time I watched her disappear into the crowd of soldiers, servants, and nobles, I felt the same thing, as if something was out of place, as if there was a missing piece in a puzzle I still couldn't see. The problem was, she never looked at me. She looked at him, the Marquis, and whenever she smiled at that man, it was as if the rest of the world disappeared around her. Maybe it wasn't my business. Maybe I should have ignored it. Maybe some people need to make their own mistakes. But I hated seeing her sad, and I hated even more realizing that I was starting to care. Because it wasn't my problem. It shouldn't have been. And yet, when I found her in that corridor, a suitcase at her feet and eyes trying to hide a pain she could no longer carry alone, I knew that man had made a mistake he still wasn't capable of understanding. She could barely look at me that day, maybe because I was a king, maybe because she never really saw me, or maybe some wounds run too deep to be seen. Then she left, and I let her go. But for the first time in many years, I regretted letting someone walk away, because something told me that wouldn't be the last time our paths crossed. I just never imagined I would find her like that.
The hallway was far too quiet for that hour. Evangeline carried the cake with both hands, moving carefully, as if it might collapse with the slightest wrong movement. It probably would. She had never been particularly good at baking, and the proof was right there, covered in uneven frosting and decorated in a way no maid would dare call beautiful. But it was hers. Made with her own hands, with help, patience, and more than one failed attempt before she finally got it right. 3 years. She had walked down that hallway hundreds of times wearing armor, carrying a sword, standing tall and disciplined, never carrying a cake, never with her heart racing for a reason that had nothing to do with battle, and never wearing a dress like a noble lady. But today was special. It was his birthday, and she was going to surprise him. He's going to think it's ridiculous. The thought came and went quickly. Maybe he would, but he'd smile that smile too. She kept walking. The sound reached her before she could fully recognize what it was. Male voices, muted laughter behind heavy wood, the unmistakable clink of glasses, the side hall where the nobles usually gathered after dinner. She automatically slowed her pace, the way every soldier does when something feels wrong, even before knowing exactly why. The door was slightly open. Then she heard the name. Vivian. Evangeline stopped. "Vivian arrives tomorrow," one of the counts said. She recognized the slightly nasal tone, softened by wine. "After all this time, can you imagine, Levi?" Silence. Not the kind that meant indifference. The other kind. The kind that comes when someone is processing something. "Vivian." Levi's voice sounded different, lower, heavier. "How many years has it been?" 6? 7? You probably remember better than I do." Laughter, glasses clinking. Evangeline didn't move. The cake was growing heavier in her arms, but she barely noticed. "The man almost married her," another voice said with amusement. "You even asked for her hand, didn't you?" "She turned him down," someone added. "Said he didn't have enough influence at court, said it was too soon. And now?" Levi's voice changed slightly at the question. Not anger, not bitterness. Something worse. Something she recognized against her will. Longing. Now you have status, the Count replied with the kind of grin men wear when they think they're being clever. Maybe she's changed her mind. More laughter. And what about the other one? Someone asked casually, almost bored. The she-wolf from the guard. Are you finally going to marry her after 3 years? Or are you going to keep stringing her along? Evangeline felt her heartbeat shift. Just slightly. Enough to know that whatever came next was going to hurt. Marry her? Levi laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was worse. It was genuine. The frosting was beginning to melt beneath the warmth of her hands. She's pretty, pleasant, good company. He continued with the same easy tone someone might use while listing the qualities of a favorite horse. But a Luna? A Marchioness? She's just a soldier. No bloodline, no family. She arrived here with no name and no past. Then why 3 years, Levi? The answer took only a second. Because the Alpha King respects her. His voice shifted slightly. More calculating. Have you noticed how he handles meetings when she's present? How his posture changes? The king has always watched that woman differently. And that benefited me far more than any political alliance I could have secured on my own. No. The thought barely formed. When I earned the title of Duke, he continued, his voice so cold it sounded like it belonged to a completely different man. I won't need this arrangement anymore. The plate suddenly felt too heavy. She never noticed when her fingers loosened. The crash echoed loudly through the silent hallway. Ceramic against stone. Frosting splattering across the cold floor. The cake collapsing as if it had never held its shape at all. The door to the hall never opened, but the voices stopped. Then footsteps approached from the hallway to her right. Light footsteps, thin soles, the kind that belong to women who don't need armor to command space. Evangeline looked up instinctively. 3 noble women stood there, staring at the destroyed cake, at her frozen in the middle of the corridor. The first looked at the second with a smile that needed no words. Isn't that the woman Marquis Levi is seeing? The second murmured, making no real effort to be discreet. I think so. The third tilted her head slightly, wearing the kind of clinical curiosity people reserve for those they don't consider worthy of real feelings. I never understood that choice, honestly. The king pities her, said the first, as though she had just solved an old mystery. She arrived alone, no family, no past, no memory of who she used to be. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. The forgotten one. How did I not see it? The voice inside her didn't sound angry. It sounded tired, resigned. The kind of realization that arrives when the answer has been sitting in front of you the entire time. Love makes fools of us. She bent down to gather the broken pieces. Her knee slipped in the frosting. The 3 noblewomen laughed. She didn't look at them. She stayed kneeling in the hallway, collecting shattered ceramic with her bare hands, feeling the cold stone through the fabric of her trousers. Her face smeared with frosting from the hand she had used to wipe away her tears. And she thought, 3 years. 3 years in that castle. 3 years being the quiet woman who never asked questions about when, about titles, about the future. The woman who accepted, it's not the right time yet, because she trusted him. Because she cared. Because she believed there was a difference between a man who hadn't proposed yet and a man who never intended to. The next morning, she woke far too early. She hadn't really slept. She had drifted through that suspended state between rest and thought, where everything the mind refuses to face during the day returns in fragments. Levi's voice, his laughter, the word Duke. When I earn the title, I won't need this arrangement anymore. She rose before sunrise and began folding her clothes. There wasn't much. 3 years in the castle, and she still owned very little. She had always lived like a soldier, even after her relationship with Levi had earned her better quarters. A wooden chest filled with simple clothes. A few finer pieces he had given her with that smile she could suddenly see for what it really was. A gift from a man maintaining a facade. She folded the fabric harder than necessary. She was nearly finished when she heard voices downstairs. Women's voices. Excited voices. The kind of energy that follows the arrival of someone important. Evangeline stopped. She descended through one of the castle's side wings, carrying her suitcase without any particular destination in mind. And that was where she saw her. Vivian. She needed no introduction. Some people occupy a room in a way that makes introductions unnecessary. Vivian was one of those people. Tall, elegant, possessing the effortless grace of high nobility that only appears effortless because it has been cultivated for an entire lifetime. Her dark hair was flawlessly arranged. Her dress cost more than a royal guard's yearly salary. She stood beside Levi, and they were laughing. Evangeline hadn't intended to stop, but she did, because Vivian's hand rested lightly on Levi's arm. Because Levi leaned toward her with that easy smile he always used when he wanted to impress someone. And Evangeline realized with horrifying clarity that she knew that smile. She had received it many times herself. It was never exclusive. Vivian said something quietly. Levi laughed for real this time, tipping his head back, completely relaxed, completely present. Not once did his eyes scan the nearby hallway where Evangeline stood with a suitcase in one hand and 3 years collapsing inside her chest. "So, I hear you have a lady courting your attention," Vivian said, louder this time, with the teasing tone of someone who already knows the answer. "That you're nearly engaged." Levi chuckled. The court invents far too many stories. His tone was completely relaxed. "I've never had any important woman in my life. Casual relationships, like any nobleman. Nothing worth mentioning. Nothing worth mentioning." The suitcase slipped from her hand. Not dramatically. The leather hit the stone floor with a dull thud. Clothes spilled around her feet. Evangeline stared at them for a moment that lasted far too long. Levi finally looked at her. "Evangeline, It's all right, my lord." Her voice came out steady. She had no idea where that steadiness came from. It certainly wasn't coming from her chest, which felt completely shattered. But it came. "I'm fine." She crouched down and began gathering her clothes. Her fingers weren't cooperating. Then another hand appeared, large, sun-darkened from years outdoors, quietly helping gather the clothes. No rush, no comments. She looked up. The Alpha King was crouched beside her, folding her belongings with a calmness that made absolutely no sense for a man of his position. Evangeline felt her blood turn to ice. Levi froze. For exactly 2 seconds, Vivian lost her easy smile before recovering her composure. The Alpha King placed the last folded item into the suitcase and stood. His eyes met hers. Those eyes she had always found impossible to hold for long. "Where are you going?" he asked quietly. She immediately looked away. "I'm donating some clothes to charity, Your Majesty." His gaze moved slowly to the suitcase, then back to her. He stared at her in silence. And suddenly she felt her face burn, unsure where to hide her humiliation. "You may go," he said at last, stepping aside. She thanked him, picked up the suitcase, and walked away quickly. Not running, never looking back. But before she reached the corner, she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, determined. Levi. He touched her arm gently, the same gentle touch she had always mistaken for care. "Evangeline." His voice was controlled. "You understand how court politics work." She looked down at his hand. "Certain things can't be discussed publicly," he continued, "especially in front of noble families. Vivian comes from an important bloodline, and one wrong word. You don't need to explain. Her own voice sounded distant, far too calm for what she was feeling. I understand. Levi visibly relaxed. I knew you would. The smile returned, easy, comfortable. You always understand. Oh, and by the way, yesterday was your birthday. Happy birthday. He forced an awkward smile that never reached his eyes, because deep down, he knew exactly what that meant. Yesterday, on her birthday. He hadn't even looked for her. She nodded, and he left, satisfied. You always understand. As if endless patience were a virtue, as if swallowing every disappointment forever was a strength rather than the reason she now stood there with a poorly packed suitcase and a heart in pieces. She waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then she turned the corner, descended the side staircase, and found a carriage waiting behind the castle. She never said where she was going. She simply climbed inside. And when the doors closed and the wheels began rolling across the stone road, she leaned her head against the cold wooden frame of the window and watched the castle shrink into the distance. One thought echoed through her mind. No one here knows who I really am. 3 years pretending. 3 years being the nameless soldier. The woman with no past. No family. Evangeline, the she-wolf of the royal guard. The woman who arrived from nowhere with no memories. Except there was one detail she had never told anyone in that castle. She had never actually lost her memory. She had always known exactly who she was. She had simply lied, so no one would ask questions about the past she had spent years trying to hide. The carriage traveled for hours before crossing the border. And when the towers of her homeland appeared on the horizon, ancient, built from dark stone, constructed to endure for centuries, she felt something stir inside her chest that she couldn't immediately name. Home. The royal guards recognized her before she even stepped down from the carriage. She saw their eyes widen, their postures stiffen in surprise, and she knew that within minutes, the entire castle would know. The great hall looked exactly as she remembered. Massive. Cold. Filled with dark banners swaying gently in the drafts that drifted through the towering windows. Then King Edmund entered. He was as tall as she remembered. He carried the posture of a man who had ruled alone for far too long. Broad shoulders, a guarded expression, eyes that evaluated everything before a single word was spoken. A man hardened by years of making decisions no one else wanted to make. She expected coldness. That was the man she remembered. But the king stopped. He stood completely still for several seconds, staring at her as if he were looking at something he had long ago given up hoping to see again. Then he walked toward her and embraced her. Evangeline froze. Her arms remained at her sides for several seconds, unsure what to do, because this wasn't the father she remembered. This wasn't the man who had buried himself in the duties of the kingdom after her mother's death, and forgotten there was a daughter sitting across from him at countless silent dinners. But he was holding her, tightly, with the heavy silence of someone who had too much to say and no idea where to begin. Something cracked inside her chest. When he finally pulled back and cupped her face with both hands, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. My daughter. His voice came out rough, almost disbelieving. Why are you crying already? She hadn't even realized she was. She broke apart right there in the arms of a man who had never known how to show affection and was trying now. And it hurt in a completely different way than anything she had felt that week. A clean pain, an old pain, the kind that appears when you finally stop holding everything together. And as she cried there, leaning against the father who had never truly known how to be a father, she thought of Levi. Nothing worth mentioning. And she cried even harder. When she finally calmed down, he gently pulled away and studied her face with the same sharp gaze he had always possessed. Then he said, "I missed you." She slowly lifted her eyes, surprised by the words. The king remained still before her, but there was something different in his voice. Less steel, more exhaustion. "For years, I imagined the worst." He exhaled slowly. "But I knew you were alive. I felt that you were alive this entire time." His voice softened. "Alphas always know when their pups are alive." She didn't answer. She simply looked at him while silence settled between them. "Because I was the one who raised you." His voice grew firm again, carrying that hard-earned pride men like him rarely showed. "I raised you to be strong, to survive, to defend yourself." Her chest tightened. "It doesn't matter where you've been," he continued, "or what happened while you were gone." Then he hesitated for the briefest moment, almost imperceptibly. "And even though this is difficult to say, because I haven't said it in many years," his eyes met hers. "I love you." The air caught in her throat, because those words carried more weight than any apology ever could. But then King Edmund straightened once more, as though he needed to become nothing more than the ruler of a kingdom again. "Now that you've returned, we can resume the arranged marriage." She blinked, still disoriented by the sudden shift. "What marriage?" "The one that was arranged before you left." His voice had returned to its firm, direct tone. "You ran away before you even met your suitor." She stared at him for several seconds. "Who is he?" Edmund didn't answer immediately. There was something in that silence she couldn't decipher. It didn't feel like hesitation. It felt like calculation. "We'll discuss that later," he finally said. "First, you need to return to your training. Resume your preparation to become a Luna. The responsibilities you abandoned are still waiting for you." He expected the old resistance to emerge, the same resistance that had driven her to flee this castle years ago. But the girl who had left was not the same woman now standing before him with a poorly packed suitcase. "I accept." Edmund slowly raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting an immediate refusal, and for the briefest fraction of a second, she thought she saw pride in his eyes. The training began a few days later. But as the months passed, the combat masters stopped treating it like a simple courtesy extended to the king's daughter. She was too fast, too precise. The movement patterns she was supposedly relearning were already ingrained in her body, as if they had never disappeared. Because they never had. 3 years living beyond the castle walls and training as an ordinary soldier had transformed her into something very different from the refined Lunas this kingdom usually produced. By the 3rd month of training, after defeating a 3rd combat instructor in a row in front of dozens of soldiers, one of the older warriors quietly murmured to the man beside him, "She was born for this." Edmund was watching from the balcony. He said nothing, but she felt his gaze and knew he had heard. At the end of that training session, he descended to the field and approached close enough to speak only to her. "Your suitor will arrive soon." A pause. "I'll begin the preparations." She wiped sweat from her forehead with her wrist. "What's his name?" "You'll meet him soon enough. Always like this." She suppressed a sigh. "Can you at least give me a clue? A title? A kingdom?" Edmund looked at her for a moment that lasted too long. "He is worthy of you." She nodded calmly. Probably Silas, she thought. The controversial beta prince her father had mentioned for years as a possible alliance. Merciless, calculating. But anything was better than a marquis who treated her like a political asset. Honestly, he's not my type, she thought as she bent down to retrieve her sword. But at least he'd be honest about what he wanted. 2 days later, the entire castle's mood changed. Soldiers lined the courtyard. Nobles filled the staircases. Servants rushed through the halls, making final preparations with the kind of excitement that only exists when a truly important guest is arriving. She descended the grand staircase calmly, dressed as a Luna, not a soldier, which still felt strange on her own body, emotionally prepared to fulfill her role, to shake hands with some prince she'd never met, and begin building an alliance that would at least be straightforward. Honest, clean. The main gates opened, and her world stopped, because the man who entered the castle wasn't Silas, wasn't a beta, wasn't some distant prince she could greet with political indifference. It was Alpha King Klaus, the same man who had crouched beside her in the hallway of Wolvengard and helped gather the clothes scattered across the stone floor. The same man whose eyes she had avoided for 3 years because they were far too difficult to look into for long. The same man who was looking at her exactly that way now, standing perfectly still in the middle of the hall, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet too. The silence that settled over the hall was heavy enough for every noble present to realize that something was happening between the two of them. He knew the promised Luna had returned, but he didn't know it was her, and she read that realization clearly on his face. The exact moment recognition struck, followed immediately by something she could only identify because she felt the same thing inside herself. Devastation. I can't marry her. She didn't hear the words, but she saw them. She saw them in the way his expression slowly closed off, like a door being pulled shut from the inside. She saw it in the moment his golden eyes lost that brief flash of openness and became what they had always been. Controlled. Cold. Far too real for anything except strategy. She lowered her head and pretended she hadn't seen any of it. The great hall had never felt so small. Evangeline stood beside her father, carrying herself with the posture of a Luna she was still learning to wear, shoulders back, chin raised, hands resting calmly at her sides, as Klaus crossed the hall toward them with a stride that didn't need speed to feel urgent. Everyone unconsciously stepped back. That was the effect he had. She had seen it hundreds of times in the corridors of Wolvengard and had never thought much about it. But now, standing across from him in her father's hall, it was impossible to ignore. The entire atmosphere changed whenever he entered a room. Her soldiers recognized it. She had seen it in their eyes the moment he rode through the gates. He's not just any king, she thought, hating herself for realizing it now of all times. Klaus stopped in front of her father, and the two men exchanged greetings. Then his dark eyes found hers. Quick, brief, far too controlled. The dinner table had been set for 3, her father at the head, Klaus to the right, her to the left, trying very hard to appear completely indifferent to all of it. Conversation flowed easily between the two men. Territories, alliances, border strategies. Her father spoke to the Alpha King the way he spoke to very few men, directly, without unnecessary diplomacy, without the polished layer he reserved for other nobles. Klaus answered in exactly the same way, which clearly pleased her father even more. She tightened her grip on her wineglass. At one point, her father inclined his head slightly toward her and said, with the quiet satisfaction of a man about to show off something that made him proud, "My daughter has spent the last few days defeating every combat master in this kingdom." One of Klaus's eyebrows lifted slightly. Impressive. "Nothing unusual," her father replied, with the straightforward simplicity Evangeline recognized as his version of praise. A Luna of noble blood defeating a combat master isn't an achievement. It's an obligation. Then he turned to Klaus with the firm look of a man who never asked, only announced. "I want to see her defeat an Alpha King." The silence that followed lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Klaus smiled. He looked at her father with something close to approval, before allowing his gaze to briefly settle on her. Evangeline felt her stomach twist. He loved the idea. And worse, she understood why. She had served in his wolf guard. She knew exactly who he was. He trained. Always. No matter how many councils, alliances, or territories depended on his decisions, he had never stopped picking up a sword. Her father watched them with poorly disguised satisfaction. Then Edmund slowly rotated his wineglass between his fingers and said, without looking directly at her, "It's a shame she disappeared for so many years. She could have learned a great deal about other kingdoms." Her father nodded, slightly melancholic, and Klaus lifted his eyes toward her with an infuriating calmness before replying, "I think your daughter knows far more about my kingdom than she realizes." She froze. Her eyes widened. He continued, swirling his wine with the same casual ease of someone commenting on the weather. "In fact, I'd wager she knows my castle very well." Her father frowned slightly, confused. Evangeline shot Klaus a subtle look. A warning. Small. Desperate. And he simply held her gaze with that faint smile that was beginning to drive her insane. Her father had never asked where she had spent those years. He had been too happy to have her back to think about asking the obvious question. And Klaus knew it. The training field sat 15 minutes from the castle, in a wide, stone-ringed clearing that the kingdom had used for elite training for generations. The morning air was cold and carried the scent of damp earth. She arrived on time. He was already there. No heavy armor, just dark training clothes, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a wooden practice sword slowly spinning between his fingers as he stared toward the horizon. When she approached, he didn't immediately turn around. For some reason, that irritated her. Eventually, he looked over his shoulder. There was that trace of amusement lingering at the corner of his mouth, the expression she was beginning to recognize, and hate, at the same time. They took their positions with wooden swords. No ceremony, no lengthy warm-up. She attacked first. He blocked with a level of ease that felt almost insulting, redirecting her strike and giving her room to reposition. She attacked again. Faster, changing angles. This time he actually had to take half a step back. Good. They continued like that for several minutes. She pressed. He defended, counterattacking with the calm precision that came from decades of real combat experience. Gradually, she realized he wasn't simply defending. He was studying her. Every movement pattern, every hesitation, every moment when her body made a decision before her mind did. He was analyzing her. Then he stopped. Now for the other part. She held her breath. What part? Your father asked me to complete your Luna training. He planted the wooden sword in the ground beside him. It's not just about fighting. She already knew where this was going. She knew. Yet somehow she had hoped he would ignore this portion, because this was the difficult part. The mental bond, he said, directly. Every pack possessed it. A silent communication blessed by the moon goddess that connected wolves during battle. Brief thoughts, intentions, warnings. But Aluna had something more. Not merely the ability to connect, the ability to influence, to enter that space and calm what was breaking apart. The fury. Every alpha knew it. Every warrior of strong blood knew it. The moment when the wolf's instincts overpowered the man's reason. Blind territorial rage, violent, uncontrollable. Fights that had no winners because nobody was thinking anymore by the time they began. Aluna could stop it. Passively, through her presence alone. Or actively, by entering the bond and reaching the emotional state of another wolf with genuine intent. It was dangerous to train, because it required both people to truly open the connection. You know what I'm asking, he said, reading her hesitation. I do. And you know why it's important. I know that too. Klaus stood several paces away. Then we'll do both at once. He pointed his sword toward her. You'll fight me while keeping the bond open. Don't let anything through that you don't want through. Just conversation. No memories. No emotions. Easy for him to say. And when I start pushing too hard, he continued, use your calming ability. Don't wait for me to ask. Act. She nodded. They returned to position. The bond opened slowly, the way it always did between wolves who didn't belong to the same pack. With resistance. With that strange sensation of hearing a voice inside your head that wasn't your own. His mental presence wasn't what she expected. It wasn't loud. It was dense, controlled. Like someone who had spent an entire lifetime deciding exactly what he allowed through. Raise your shields. His voice arrived directly in her mind. You're leaving everything open. She mentally closed what needed closing and attacked simultaneously. He blocked and sidestepped, moving behind her to adjust her stance. His hand wrapped around hers, correcting her grip. For several seconds they stood far too close. The warmth of his body, his breath near her neck. Elbow higher, he said through the bond with the same casual tone someone might use discussing the weather. She adjusted, then immediately tried a surprise counterattack he clearly wasn't expecting. He dodged at the last second. A low sound escaped him. Half laugh, half surprise. Then he stepped back. Good. She said nothing, just reset. They continued for a long time, fighting, maintaining the bond. She tried desperately not to let anything slip through the mental connection. He kept testing her limits, pressuring harder whenever he sensed her attention splitting between both tasks. Then came the moment he pushed too far. A strike delivered with more force than necessary. Still controlled, he would never truly lose control. But strong enough for her to feel the intention behind it. Not aggression. A test. Now. The message arrived without words. Do it now. She released her power. It wasn't physical. It came from within. A wave of calm flowed through the open bond and touched him directly. It didn't suppress. It didn't control. It soothed, like water poured over fire. He stopped instantly, completely still. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. Then he looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. You've done that before. It wasn't a question. I've never trained it. She lowered her sword. But I've always felt like I knew how. For a moment he simply stared at her. Your father wasn't exaggerating. She almost smiled, but stopped herself. Then he picked up his sword again and returned to position as if nothing had happened. Yet something had changed. He felt less evaluative now, more present. They continued. And then, without interrupting the fight, he asked in that low voice she was beginning to recognize as concern disguised as indifference. Your father doesn't know where you've been all these years, does he? She kept her eyes on his blade. No. He rotated his sword, blocking another strike. And he doesn't know who you were involved with? 2 seconds passed. No. She counterattacked from the opposite side. Unless you tell him. Klaus's jaw tightened instantly. She felt it through the bond. Not memories, not words, just sudden tension. Like a door slamming shut. Anger. Not at her. At something she had said without meaning to. Jealousy, she thought. Then immediately forbade herself from thinking it. His movements grew sharper, closer. As if reducing the physical distance between them was his answer to everything he refused to say aloud. She stepped back. He stepped forward twice. Her heels struck the stone boundary marking the edge of the training field. There was nowhere left to go. She tried to turn, lost her balance for a fraction of a second. His arms closed around her before she could hit the ground. Both of them froze. She was pressed against the stone wall. His arms braced on either side of her. His chest barely an inch from her face. Their breathing uneven. Morning sunlight warmed the stone behind her. His shadow covered nearly everything. His golden eyes lowered slowly. Not toward the sword, not toward the field. Toward her lips. No. The thought slipped through the still open bond before he could stop it. Fragmented. Quick. But she felt it. And with it came something deeper. Something without words. The feeling of a man struggling to hold something far too heavy for far too long. Her lip brushed the corner of his mouth. Light. Accidental. Nothing more than proximity, gravity, and two bodies with no space left between them. The Alpha King's golden eyes flared. His breathing turned rough, uneven. The hands braced against the stone slowly curled into fists, as though his fingers were searching for something to hold on to. Then he closed his eyes. 1 second. 2. When he opened them again, they were still gold. But everything else had returned to place. The line of his jaw, the posture, the distance he built around himself as if it were part of his armor. He stepped away, slowly, like a man waking from something. I'm sorry. His voice came out rough. Different. I think I almost lost control. She straightened as well, looking away, searching for something neutral in the landscape. I don't know what came over me either. The silence that followed was different from all the others, heavy with something neither of them intended to name. Then he asked, quietly, directly, in a voice that didn't shake, but could have. Do you still care about the Marquis? She couldn't answer. Not because she did. That wasn't it. The question had come while she was still trying to remember how to breathe, and silence arrived before words could. He waited. Then, when it became clear no answer was coming, a small bitter smile appeared on his face. It hurt more than anything he could have said. Then I guess that's a yes. He picked up the wooden sword from the ground, brushed the dust away, and started walking back toward the castle. She remained beside the stone wall, staring at her hands. It's not a yes, she wanted to say, but he was already gone. The next morning arrived beneath a sky still covered in gray clouds. Evangeline descended into the courtyard with her boots already laced and her hair tied back, finding the horses prepared and the royal guard standing in 2 neat rows. Klaus was already mounted when she arrived, back straight, eyes fixed on the horizon. She mounted her horse without looking at him. The hunt was one of her father's kingdom's oldest traditions. Every important visit ended this way. A morning in the forest, horses, guards, and formality disguised as entertainment. Her father had organized everything with the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed things were going well. They were not going well. Evangeline kept her horse several paces behind Klaus's for the first hour. It wasn't an obvious distance, just enough to avoid conversation. The wind drifted through the towering trees while the guards followed behind in respectful silence. Then she realized the guards were gone. She looked back. Trees. Only trees. Where are the guards? She asked. Klaus calmly surveyed the forest around them. Your father probably ordered them to keep their distance. She sighed. So we'd feel more comfortable. Apparently. The horses slowed on their own as the forest grew denser, and the silence that settled between them was different from before. Tighter. Harder to ignore. He spoke first. You really spent 3 years living beside that man? She didn't pretend not to understand. Does that question serve any purpose? It does. His voice was direct, stripped of its usual teasing edge. We're getting married. It tells me something about who you are. She turned toward him. Then ask who I am, not what I did. He held her gaze for a moment. You're avoiding the question. I'm answering the wrong one. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Then he leaned slightly forward over the reins and asked in a lower voice, Were you intimate with him? The air between them changed instantly. Heat rose to her face, and she was furious that it did. You're questioning my honor? No. A pause. But you know how these things work. That's none of your concern. It is entirely my concern. His golden eyes locked onto hers. She swallowed hard. Hearing those words from him, in that tone, low, steady, affected her far more than it should have. I was never involved with him that way. Her voice came out sharper than intended, even though he pushed for it more times than I'd like to remember. A bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. He always promised marriage afterward. Said we needed to act like a real couple first. She shook her head. Maybe I'm not the smartest woman in the world, but I know how to recognize when a man is making promises just to get what he wants. Klaus was silent for a moment. Then a short laugh escaped him, almost to himself. You're smarter than you think, he said. She opened her mouth to answer, and her horse exploded beneath her. The animal reared and bolted through the forest with such violence that she lost control in less than a second. The rains burned her palms. Branches whipped past. The uneven ground jolted her violently. She instinctively lowered herself, trying to regain control, but the horse was completely consumed by panic. There was nothing to hold on to. She heard Klaus curse behind her. Then there was only the sound of pounding hooves, snapping branches, and rushing wind. The terrain began to slope downward. She saw the drop a second before the horse stumbled into a sudden chaotic slowdown. Then her balance disappeared. She slipped sideways. His arms caught her before she hit the ground. The collision knocked the breath from her lungs. Her back pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. Both of them breathless and frozen in the middle of the forest, while the horse finally slowed several yards away. Neither moved. His breathing was heavy near her temple. His hands remained locked around her waist. She could feel every finger separately through the fabric, as though the warmth of his touch passed straight through it. Then a fragment of the bond slipped through before he could stop it. Not words, not a thought, just a feeling. It struck her chest as though it belonged to her. Relief. So intense it hurt. She went completely still, because that wasn't the relief of someone who had prevented an accident. It was the relief of someone who had been carrying something for far too long and had finally let it fall, if only for a second. He realized she had felt it. His arms loosened immediately. She slowly turned around. When their eyes met, there was something entirely different in his expression. The look of a man who had accidentally revealed too much and hadn't yet decided what to do about it. His golden gaze dropped briefly. Then he stepped back. The posture returned, the shoulders, the distance. Are you all right? His voice was far too neutral for what had just happened. It took her a second to answer. I am. He nodded, took hold of his horse's reins, and started walking back through the forest without another word, putting distance between them as though distance could solve anything. She remained where she was, staring at her own hands. That night's dinner was quieter than the others. Her father talked. Klaus answered. She participated when necessary, but spent most of the evening trapped inside her own thoughts. She didn't look at him once during the meal. But she knew, with the kind of certainty that needs no confirmation, that he looked at her. When her father finally excused himself to attend to matters of the kingdom, the hall gradually emptied until only the crackling torches remained. She was about to stand when his voice stopped her. May I speak with you? She froze. He stood beside a window overlooking the courtyard below. Torchlight struck the side of his face as he turned, and there was something in his expression she had never seen before. Tired. She remained where she was. "We're getting married in 15 days, he said. Her heart accelerated before she could stop it. "I accepted this alliance long before I knew who you were." A brief pause. "But things are different now." She didn't answer. He took a few steps closer. "It's impossible to look at you and not think about that, Marquise." His voice was low, direct. "I can't pretend otherwise." The words hurt. "I need to know whether you're willing to forget that man." His golden eyes locked onto hers. "Because you're coming back to my kingdom with me." Another pause. "And he'll be there." She lowered her gaze. Her silence shattered something inside him. "You don't have to go through with this because of politics." For the first time, his voice faltered, just slightly. "I know you don't want to disappoint your father." And suddenly she understood what he was doing. He was building an escape route for her, wrapping his own pain in generosity so she wouldn't have to feel guilty for walking away. He took a slow breath before continuing, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." Then he turned to leave. "Send me a letter confirming whether you still want this marriage or not." She stared at his back, and before thought could become decision, she grabbed his hand. He stopped immediately, completely still, his back still turned toward her. "I don't want to give up our alliance." Her voice came out firm, stronger than she expected. "I want to continue with you." Slowly, he turned around. Golden eyes met hers. She took a deep breath. "But if you think my past will be a source of shame for you in your kingdom." Her voice wavered slightly at the end. "Then tell me. I'll explain it to my father. He'll understand." He stared at her for a long moment, then tightened his fingers around hers. "You're not understanding." She lifted her eyes. "What am I not understanding?" He looked at her for far too long, and she saw it. The exact moment something rose to his lips and was swallowed back down. His golden eyes traced her face as if searching for something he still hadn't found. Then he slowly released her hand. "I'm leaving tomorrow." His voice was quiet, final. "Decide what you truly want. I'll wait for your letter." And then he walked away. She sat at the desk in her room with a quill in hand and a blank sheet of parchment before her. She sat there for a long time. Then she began to write. Not a political letter, not a confirmation of an alliance. Because some things only become clear when someone leaves and the silence they leave behind becomes impossible to ignore. "I want you." I don't know how to explain it properly, but it feels as though you've always been there, and I simply wasn't paying attention. You left yesterday, and I already miss you. That makes no sense. Or maybe it does, and that's exactly what scares me. You're far more than I deserve, and I still don't know what to do with that. She stopped writing, stared at the words for several seconds, then folded the parchment before she could change her mind. A knock sounded at the door. Her father entered before she could answer. "Pack your things." His voice was calm, firm. "We have somewhere to be. Trust me." The carriage traveled for hours. She stared out the window without asking where they were going. Then, when the towers appeared on the horizon and she recognized their outline, the air left her lungs all at once. No, but yes, they were the towers of Wolvengard. She was no longer returning as a soldier, no longer returning nameless, with no past, with no one knowing who she truly was. She was returning as the Luna of another kingdom. And the entire castle knew it before the carriage had even stopped. She saw it in people's eyes as she stepped down. The murmurs beginning in the corners, spreading through the corridors, reaching even the soldiers who knew her by name, and now looked at her in a completely different way. Wait, wasn't that the she-wolf from the guard? She was a Luna? How did no one find out? She's going to marry the Alpha King? She kept her posture, and then he appeared. He descended the steps of the great hall slowly. His eyes swept across the room for an instant before stopping on her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Klaus descended the last steps without taking his eyes off her, and when he came close enough to speak, the nobles around them went silent, as though they understood they were not welcome in the small space between them. "This was certainly your father's idea," he said quietly. "You don't need to explain." He looked at her father with flawless formality. "It is an honor to receive you both." Then his eyes returned to her, and his voice changed. Lower, more intimate, heavy with the weight of a man who had chosen every word before speaking. "Especially my future wife." Her knees nearly gave out, and she was furious at them for it. He gave her 1 second. Only one. Then he added, "My future queen." I'm going to faint. The thought came completely against her will. I swear I'm going to faint right here in front of everyone. But she didn't. She stood tall, held his gaze, and tried to breathe normally while the entire castle watched her. And while the Marquise of Wolvengard, somewhere in the hall, finally understood what he was seeing. His face was the face of a man who had just had the ground ripped out from under him. His mouth slightly parted, his eyes moving over her from head to toe, as if trying to fit together two images that didn't belong. The soldier, the Luna, the same woman. She didn't look away. She passed him without stopping. The entire castle wanted to look at her, and she let them look, because there was nothing left to hide. Levi tried to approach her twice that afternoon. The first time she was surrounded by nobles as she was being formally introduced, and he had no opening. The second time, she simply turned down a corridor before he could get close. The third time, he found her. She was in the castle's outer gardens, needing 5 minutes away from everyone, when she heard footsteps behind her. She recognized them before she turned. "Evangeline." She stopped, but she didn't turn around right away. "Please." His voice was different. Gone was that calculated ease he always carried. "Just 1 moment." She turned. His face was genuinely shaken. And that surprised her, because she had spent weeks preparing herself to see him again. But she had not prepared herself for this. "What is going on?" His voice came out confused, almost desperate. "Why did you never tell me?" She took a deep breath. "Because I thought you might actually care about me." His eyes faltered. "I ran away from my kingdom because I didn't want to live surrounded by politics and arranged marriages." Her voice lowered. "I didn't want to be a Luna. I only wanted to live like someone normal." Then she looked straight at him. "And I truly cared about you, Levi." That broke something in him. She saw the exact moment he realized what he had destroyed with his own hands. He stepped closer. "Then you can't marry him." She frowned. "If you love me." His voice turned urgent. "You need to stay with me. I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake, but..." "Am I interrupting something?" The voice came from behind them with that particular calm that was more intimidating than any shout. The Alpha King. The Marquis immediately stepped back, his posture shifting in a fraction of a second. Shoulders lowering, chin dipping, that involuntary submission of a wolf before an alpha. "Your Majesty, I was only..." But Klaus wasn't looking at him. He was looking at her, and there was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Not anger, worse than anger. Disappointment. He stared at her in silence for several seconds, and she opened her mouth, needing to explain, needing to say it wasn't what it looked like, that she hadn't asked for that conversation, that, "I see you still haven't managed to forget him." His voice came out low. No accusation, no drama. Only the weary realization of someone confirming something he had been trying not to believe. Then he turned his back and walked away. "Wait." She stepped forward, but he had already disappeared around the corridor. That night's dinner was a silent torment. The table was long and crowded, nobles, allies, visitors from neighboring kingdoms. Her father sat at the head, pleased with the formality of the gathering, and Vivian sat very close to Klaus's right, wearing a dark dress and a bright smile. Vivian was working. Evangeline saw it from the beginning, the way she leaned slightly toward him during conversations, the way her hand briefly rested on his arm whenever she made a comment. The laughter, carefully calculated, soft, perfectly measured to seem spontaneous. And the worst part? He didn't stop her. He remained polite, formal, responding with that kingly composure that never revealed what he was truly thinking. But he didn't pull away, didn't create distance. He simply allowed the conversation to happen with that neutrality that could mean everything or nothing. Evangeline gripped her wineglass harder than necessary. "Stop," she ordered herself. "You have absolutely no right to feel this way." But she kept feeling it. She watched Vivian smile at him again and felt that awful jealousy rise through her chest like a burning ember. And the worst part was that she knew exactly what it was. She knew there was no more honest name for it, and she hated every second of having to admit it to herself. Dinner ended late. And as the last nobles began leaving and the hall gradually emptied, she stood with a decision she had never planned on making. She found him in a private room near the east wing. She knew every corridor of that castle. She had walked them for 3 years. He was standing beside a table covered in maps and documents, a fire crackling nearby. He looked up when she entered, not even surprised, as if he had been expecting her. "Interesting," she said before she could stop herself. He slightly furrowed his brow. "You spend so much time talking about me and the Marquis." She crossed her arms. "But you seemed pretty busy giving Vivian attention all through dinner." Klaus slowly leaned against the table behind him. His arms folded, his eyes fixed on hers with that calmness that drove her completely insane. "I honor my political alliances," he said, "and I'm polite to the people of my kingdom." Polite. She repeated the word with an irony she couldn't disguise. "Unlike certain people," he continued in the same calm tone, "who keep meeting former lovers in hidden gardens." That hit her squarely. "You're exaggerating." "Am I?" The tension escalated quickly. "You didn't seem bothered when Vivian was practically throwing herself at you." He slowly raised one eyebrow. Just one. With that quiet arrogance she had spent weeks trying not to find attractive. "Are you jealous, miss?" She held her breath. "No." The answer came too fast, far too defensive. And judging by his expression, he noticed. "I simply found it curious," she continued, trying to regain her footing, "to watch my future husband giving so much attention to other women." The corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. She turned her back on him. "You look beautiful when you're jealous." His voice reached her low and rough, directly against the back of her neck. She closed her eyes for a second, furious that it affected her at all. She left the room without responding. And behind her, Klaus remained standing there, a smile still lingering on his lips. The next morning, the arena was packed. It was one of the kingdom's traditions. Public training matches, competitions between nobles and members of the Wolf Guard, demonstrations of strength and skill before the court. Evangeline sat in the stands beside several noble women when Levi stepped into the arena. The people want to see their Alpha King fight. The silence that fell over the arena was immediate. Klaus had been standing near the side entrance speaking with one of the counselors. He stopped, slowly turned toward the marquis with an expression that wasn't anger. It was almost amused disbelief. "Are you sure?" Levi lifted his chin. "I am." Klaus looked at him for a second, then let out a short laugh, handed his dark cloak to one of the guards, and entered the arena with that infuriatingly confident calm of a man who had absolutely no need to prepare for something like this. Evangeline tightened her hands in her lap. The fight began, and it was over quickly enough to be humiliating. Levi was skilled, she knew that. They had trained in the same castle for years. But Klaus was something else. His movements were economical, precise, free of any unnecessary effort. And what made it truly devastating was exactly that. He wasn't trying. He was simply better, naturally, without needing to prove it. Levi attacked with anger, with ego. With that desperate need to prove something. Klaus simply blocked, dodged, waited. And when the moment came, it happened so fast that half the arena barely saw it. Levi hit the ground. The arena exploded. Klaus extended a hand to help him up. Levi accepted it with a red face and his eyes fixed on the ground. As Klaus left the arena, he passed close enough to murmur without even turning his head. "You must have enjoyed watching that." She kept looking ahead. They were just two men training. He laughed softly. Of course they were. Finally, she turned toward him. "You think everything revolves around me?" "I think this did." His golden eyes settled on hers for a moment. "Now all that's left is for you to challenge Vivian." "I don't fight like that." "That's a shame." His gaze briefly dropped to her lips. "I would have loved to watch." She crossed her arms. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Then how about right now?" It was Vivian. The arena fell silent again. Vivian stood several yards away, chin lifted, eyes fixed on Evangeline with a coldness that no longer hid behind elegance. Evangeline looked at her for a moment, then removed her coat. The fight was unlike anything the arena had seen that day. Vivian attacked first with a level of force that surprised even the oldest soldiers in the stands. Pure anger turned into violence, fast, aggressive, without any real technique beyond the desire to hurt. She struck Evangeline in the face almost immediately. The blow snapped her head sideways and opened a thin cut near her eyebrow. Another strike split her lip. She tasted blood before she felt pain. In the stands, Klaus went completely still. Evangeline stepped back twice, breathed. This bitch is actually fighting for real. Then she stopped retreating, because she had learned something during her years in the guard that Vivian had never needed to learn. Anger is energy. And energy without direction becomes a mistake. She waited. Let Vivian attack again. Harder, more desperate. And the exact moment Vivian's balance failed, she moved. Fast, clean, decisive. Vivian hit the ground. The arena lost its mind. The guards who knew Evangeline as one of their own shouted louder than anyone. Vivian left the arena without looking at anyone. Her shoulders stiff, her face red with something that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Evangeline remained standing at the center, breathing heavily, her lips split, her eyebrow throbbing. Then he was there. Klaus stopped in front of her. His eyes traveled across her injuries with an expression he was clearly trying and failing to control. "What a shame," he said quietly. She looked up at him. Seeing such a pretty face bruised like this. She immediately opened her mouth. "Are you on my side or hers?" He took a step closer. Far too close. His eyes locked on hers. I will always be on my future wife's side. Her heart did something completely inconvenient. She stood there in the center of the now empty arena, staring at his retreating back, and thought, I am completely lost. The celebration had begun before the sun had even set. The entire kingdom was celebrating, not just the castle but the streets, taverns, and outer courtyards where ordinary people gathered with torches and music. Because not every generation witnessed an Alpha King announcing a union. And when he did, the entire kingdom felt it. Inside the great hall, musicians played along the corridors. Wine flowed freely on silver trays, and nobles moved through the room in animated groups, carrying the energy of people celebrating something they believed would become history. And Evangeline stood in the middle of it all. People sought her out with genuine curiosity. The future Luna of the Alpha King, the woman who had spent 3 years among the soldiers of Wolvengard, without anyone knowing who she truly was. There was something about that story that fascinated the court, in a way no title alone ever could. She answered with composure, smiled when appropriate, allowed conversations to flow naturally, but her right eye was always somewhere else. Klaus moved through the hall speaking with allies, accepting congratulations, responding to everyone with the polite attentiveness that was uniquely his. And every so often, for no apparent reason, his gaze would sweep across the room until it found her. Just to see if she was looking. She always was. She simply pretended she wasn't. But irritation surged through her when she saw Vivian approach him with a glass of wine. She smiled, offered it. Klaus accepted with his usual courtesy, and Vivian remained beside him for several minutes, talking, smiling that smile that irritated Evangeline more than she cared to admit. What the hell does she want now? Evangeline watched from across the room. She discarded the Marquis because she never truly wanted him. Never wanted him. She wanted a title far greater than Marquis, and now she's chasing the greatest title this kingdom has to offer. She turned her face away. She woke before sunrise with the strange feeling that something was wrong. She remained in bed for several minutes, trying to identify where the feeling was coming from. Then she got up. The corridor was silent when she left her room. Most of the castle was still asleep. Only the night patrols moved through the distant hallways. She wandered without a destination, allowing her feet to choose the path. Almost by instinct, she found herself in the eastern wing. The same corridors she had walked countless times during her 3 years as a guard whenever she couldn't sleep. Then she heard the maids. 2 of them stood near a side staircase, speaking in near whispers. Did you hear? They say Vivian spent the night in his chambers. Maybe he's called off the wedding. Or maybe he's just having some fun before getting married. The women fell instantly silent when they noticed Evangeline standing in the corridor. The silence that followed was worse than the words. She looked at them for a second. Both lowered their heads. Then she continued walking. She leaned against a stone wall and stood there for several moments, breathing slowly, trying to be rational. Trying to remember that castle rumors were rarely completely true, that there were 1,000 possible explanations, that she shouldn't. But she was already walking. Klaus's chambers were in the northern wing on the 3rd floor. She knew the route without thinking. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the one before. And when she reached the door and saw it standing slightly open, her stomach dropped completely. She pushed it open. Klaus was in bed. Shirtless. Partially covered by dark sheets. Completely motionless. Deep asleep. The room looked different. Subtly disordered in a way that didn't fit the man she knew. The man who folded his own training clothes and kept his desk meticulously organized. And Vivian was sitting in a chair near the window. Evangeline froze in the doorway. Her eyes burned before she could stop them. Again. The thought struck like a punch. Only the man changed. I can't be anyone's first choice. Not even once. She said nothing. She simply turned and left. Evangeline was already packing. I was such an idiot for believing this time would be different. I don't even know how I'll explain to my father and the council that I'm walking away from this marriage without disappointing him all over again. The thoughts wouldn't stop. She folded the letter mechanically, the same letter she had written during the night with her heart completely exposed. The one telling him she wanted him. How pathetic. Half her clothes were already packed when the door opened. Evangeline. She didn't stop folding. Levi. He entered slowly and stood in the middle of the room watching her. There was something on his face she hadn't seen often. Not the easy smile, not the calculated charm. Just a man finally understanding, far too late, the magnitude of what he had destroyed. What are you doing? What does it look like? He took another step. You can't leave. She finally stopped. Turned toward him with the tired calm of someone who no longer had enough energy left for anger. Why can't I? Because I was wrong. His voice sounded different. Gone was the effortless confidence. And I regret it, every day since that night in the corridor. She stared at him silently. I know what you heard. He stepped closer. And I know I can't undo it. But what I feel for you is real, Evangeline. It always has been. It always has been. She repeated the words inside her head and waited to feel something. The familiar pain. The tightness in her chest. Anything. Nothing. I believe that you believe that, she said softly, her voice gentler than she intended. But that doesn't change anything. His eyes flickered. You're leaving because of him. She didn't answer. Evangeline. His voice became urgent. You love me. You loved me for 3 years. Feelings like that don't disappear overnight. They don't, she agreed. But they change. She returned to packing. And I've changed too. He closed the remaining distance between them and gently took hold of her arm. Then give me a chance to change too. She looked at his hand resting on her arm and thought of another hand, larger, darker. The hand that had knelt beside her on the stone floor of Wolvengard and gathered her scattered clothes without saying a single word. It's over, Levi. She gently removed his hand. Not angrily, just gently. It's over. He stood still. And then, because he was who he was, because he had never truly accepted rejection without trying one final time, he pulled her into an embrace. Her eyes began to burn. Tears threatened to fall. But not because of him. Because of everything. Because of the version of herself that had believed for 3 years. Because of the ruined birthday cake in the corridor. Because somehow she had ended up trapped in the same cycle all over again. Klaus woke with a headache. He remained lying in bed for several minutes, unable to understand why the room was so bright. He had slept late, something he hadn't done in years. His body felt unusually heavy. I drank too much. Slowly, he sat up and rubbed a hand over his face. The room was quiet. Outside, the sun was already high. Far later than he normally woke. Far later than the breakfast he had planned to share with Evangeline that morning. He froze. Breakfast. He got dressed quickly and left. And as he crossed the gardens along the shortest route toward her wing, he stopped. The flower beds near the fountain were in bloom. A moment later there were flowers in his hands, and he was climbing the stairs. Enough. The thought came simply. He was tired. Tired of calculating distance. Tired of swallowing his feelings and calling it self-control. She needed time. Fine. I can wait. I've already spent years waiting without realizing I was waiting. A few more days won't destroy me. When she finally wanted me, I wanted her for real. Not the alliance, not the Luna standing beside a king. I wanted to wake up late with her on a morning free of political obligations. I wanted to travel with her to the southern kingdoms, where the sea looked unlike anything she had ever seen, and watch her face the first time she saw it. I wanted to take her to places only I knew. The stone forest on the eastern border, the abandoned tower where I spent childhood nights staring at the stars. The valley that turned gold for 2 weeks every year, and never at any other time. I wanted to watch her fall in love with all of it, with me. I wanted her to choose to stay not because a treaty had been signed, but because she had found the place she truly wanted to be. I can wait for that. He turned the corner. But this game ends today. The corridor leading to her chambers was silent. The door stood slightly open. He stopped. He heard the Marquise's voice first. Then he saw. Evangeline stood in the middle of the room, and the Marquis was embracing her. One arm around her shoulders, or maybe her waist. Klaus couldn't tell. The flowers slipped from his fingers. They hit the stone floor of the corridor with a soft sound that nobody inside heard. He stood there, watching them. Klaus saw the choice being made in real time. Levi continued holding her for several moments, speaking softly, telling her she didn't need to leave, that he had been wrong, that he regretted it every day, that he still loved her. And she listened to every word with that strange distance of someone physically present but mentally somewhere words could not reach. Finally, she stepped away. "I need to speak with the council and with my father," she said quietly. "But I'm leaving. I can't stay here anymore." Her footsteps echoed too quickly through the stone corridor. Evangeline wasn't thinking about where she was going. She was thinking about getting there before she changed her mind. The elder counselors, the alliance, ending all of it before it hurt even more than it already did. Her eyes burned. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. She rounded the corner of the eastern wing at a brisk pace and collided directly with someone. Klaus's hands closed around her arms before she lost her balance. Both of them froze. She looked up at him. And what she found wasn't the controlled king she had always known. It was a man with uneven breathing, a tired gaze, a sad gaze. A man who looked as though he had been carrying something far too heavy for far too long. He didn't release her immediately. "Where are you going?" His voice came out rough. "To speak with the elders." She stepped away. "To cancel the alliance." "Me too." A brief pause. "I was on my way there." Silence lingered for exactly 2 seconds. "I see you're desperate to get rid of this," he said. "I'm not staying with you out of convenience." Her voice was firm. "I won't." Klaus let out a short laugh, bitter, humorless. "Must be terrible for you." His eyes held hers. "Being forced to put up with me. Being trapped in this marriage while you're in love with another man." She lifted her chin. "It must be terrible for you too." Her eyes didn't waver. "Being stuck with only one woman when you clearly prefer having several." A pause. "I'm not going to be just another one of them, Klaus." He frowned, genuinely confused. And then, instead of asking, he provoked. Because that was what he did whenever he came too close to revealing himself. "Funny." His voice was low, sharp. "You didn't seem to have that problem with the Marquis. He does whatever he wants, treats you however he wants, and you're still there." His eyes darkened. "Am I really that much worse than him that I don't even deserve a chance?" I almost begged. The realization struck him instantly. I almost begged a woman who was in another man's arms less than an hour ago. She stared at him for a second. I have nothing with Levi anymore. There was no hesitation in her voice, and I won't accept that kind of treatment from any man. Her gaze never blinked. No matter what title he carries. Another pause. Even if that man is the most powerful man in the world. Her voice hardened. Even if he's the alpha king. A beat. If I have to, I'll run away again. Liar. The word escaped before he could stop it. I saw you two. His voice hardened. You were in his arms, in your room. I saw it with my own eyes. She lowered her gaze briefly. The flowers. She had seen the flowers scattered in the corridor. So he had been there. He had seen. Then she looked back at him. I can't stay with a man who wants more than one woman. Klaus dragged a hand through his hair, his composure visibly slipping. What are you talking about? Vivian. The name came out immediately. I went to your chambers this morning. You were unconscious in bed. She was sitting beside you with that smile. Her voice faltered slightly at the end. He went completely still. I woke up alone. His words came slowly, as if reconstructing something that still didn't fully make sense. With a headache. Dizzy. I thought I'd slept too long. That I'd drunk too much during the celebration. His eyes locked onto hers. There was nobody in my room when I woke up. I swear it. She simply stared at him. I don't remember being with her. He took a step closer. Because I wasn't. His voice lowered. Yes, I gave her attention during the celebration. Other times too. His eyes never left hers. But only because you noticed. A short pause. Because whenever I did, you looked at me. His jaw tightened. You paid attention to me. Another pause. I know I was an idiot. He exhaled. I acted like a child. His voice dropped even lower. But I didn't sleep with her. Not once. I don't even remember her being in my chambers that night. His eyes found hers again. Years ago she tried something with me and I rejected her. A pause. I reject her now. Another. I would reject her 1,000 times. His voice softened. I want you. A beat. Only you. His eyes pleaded in a way she had never seen before. Please believe me. The silence between them grew heavy. When you saw us, she said slowly, I was crying. His expression shifted. Levi came to my room while I was packing. She swallowed. He approached me. I didn't ask him to be there, and I wasn't with him like that. Her eyes held his. That's all it was. Klaus released a slow breath. If you want, he said, his voice rough, I'll give you every memory from that night. A pause. Just ask. She looked at him for a long moment, then finally said, I believe you. Something in his shoulders loosened instantly. He walked toward her slowly. His hand rose and cupped her face with extraordinary care. The care of a man afraid something real might break if he held it too tightly. I've always wanted you. His voice came out rough, low. Since before I knew who you were. His thumb brushed her cheek. Back when you were just a soldier walking through my castle corridors. A faint smile touched his lips. And I kept finding excuses to be in those same corridors. Her eyes began to burn. I convinced myself you could never be mine. His thumb moved slowly across her skin. And I learned how to live with that. His golden eyes met hers. But I never stopped wanting you. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, he was closer. Then stop pulling away, she whispered. And he kissed her. It wasn't quick. It was the kiss of two people who had waited far too long. Two people who had hidden behind pride, distance, misunderstandings, flowers falling onto stone floors, and who had finally stopped holding back. His hand buried itself in her hair. The other tightened around her waist, pulling her closer. She felt his chest against hers and realized she had been waiting for this, without ever knowing she was waiting. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. He stared at her, golden eyes still glowing, his hand still resting against her face. "Now," he said, his voice low and rough. "Let's fix this misunderstanding." Klaus found Vivian still inside the castle. She had calculated that she would have more time. She had calculated wrong. When Klaus entered the hall with Evangeline beside him, Vivian's expression changed, but only for a moment. Then she recovered. "Your Majesty." The smile returned, smooth. "I'm so glad you're all right. I was worried when—" "Vivian." His voice was low. "You don't need to." Her smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her eyes briefly slid toward Evangeline. "If someone filled your head with— It was me." The voice cut across the hall. Everything went silent. Levi stood near a window, and there was something different about him. No charm, no calculation. Just a man who had looked at both paths and finally chosen the only one still left. He took a breath and spoke without embellishment. The potion was hers. A pause. Switching the wine glass during the celebration was hers too. His eyes lowered briefly. The maids who spread the rumors that morning. Another pause. She instructed every single one of them. He looked down for a second. "I knew about the plan." His voice tightened. "And I did nothing to stop it." A pause. "I was an idiot." Another. "I went along with it because I thought I still had something to gain." Then he dropped to one knee. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." Vivian looked at him kneeling on the floor and laughed. Short, disbelieving, filled with years of contempt. "You really are pathetic, Levi." Her voice was cold. "You always have been." He didn't answer. Vivian turned toward Klaus. And because she had lost everything and had nothing left to protect, she finally spoke the truth she had been hiding from the beginning. "I only did what any woman would do to be with you." No shame, no hesitation. "Maybe I chose the wrong method." Her eyes locked on his. "But I've always wanted you, Klaus." A pause. "Always." The Marquis looked up at her, stunned. Vivian continued as though he didn't exist. "She doesn't appreciate you." Her eyes flicked toward Evangeline. "She doesn't know what she has." Her smile returned. "I would." Klaus was silent for a moment. Then he answered with the kind of calm that cut deeper than any shout. "I make my own decisions, Vivian." His gaze never softened. "And you don't get to decide who should or shouldn't value me." She opened her mouth. "I politely ask," he continued, "that you leave this castle." A beat. "And never return." Vivian went completely still. The elegance, the posture, the smile. For 1 second, all of it disappeared, and beneath it stood nothing more than a woman who had wagered everything on a single move and lost beyond recovery. Then she lifted her chin, turned around, and walked away, without looking back. Klaus turned toward Levi, who still knelt on the floor. "Get up." Levi rose slowly. "You acted out of self-interest from the beginning." Klaus's voice was completely indifferent. "You used her." A pause. "You used her position to get closer to me." Another. "You took everything she gave you while never intending to give anything back." Levi said nothing. "You will never become a duke." The words landed like stone. "You will never rise in rank." A beat. and you will never come near my woman again. Silence. You remain in this kingdom because I allow it. His eyes hardened. And while I allow it, you'll remember that every day. Levi lowered his head. Without a word, Klaus turned away. And as he left the hall with Evangeline beside him, Edmund stood quietly near the doorway, leaning against the wall, watching. The expression on his face belonged to a man who understood far more than he ever revealed. He looked at the two of them together and smiled. The wedding took place at sunset. The entire kingdom gathered before the ancient stone altar, surrounded by torches and the banners of Wolfengard dancing in the mountain wind. Nobles filled the front rows. Royal guards lined the sides. And above them all, the sky burned in shades of gold and amber as the moon slowly rose behind the castle towers. Evangeline walked slowly down the aisle, her white dress trailing across the dark stone, but it was impossible to focus on anything except him. Klaus waited for her at the altar. Not as the Alpha King who terrified councils and made men lower their heads with a single look. Not as the cold, controlled man she had spent years trying to understand from afar, but as a man completely lost to her, and for the first time, he wasn't hiding it from anyone. His eyes followed every step she took, intense, fixed, almost painfully so. Edmund watched from the front row in complete silence, and there was pride there. A proud, almost emotional look as he watched his daughter cross that space, not as the girl who had run away years ago, but as a woman who had finally found her place in the world. Klaus never looked away, not even once. And then the bond slipped. Not intentionally. She felt his voice pass through her mind before he even realized he had left the connection open. She was walking away while the Marquis was talking, and all I could think was how beautiful she was. Her heart nearly stopped. Another thought followed. Older, deeper, watching her train in the guard's courtyard. Gods. There's no way she's just another wolf. What a remarkable woman. Smart, strong. Images rushed through her mind. Guards watching Evangeline fight. Men openly impressed. Women in the guard smiling as she defeated larger opponents. Her wolf form racing across the training field with impossible speed. And him. Always him. Standing silently in the background on the castle balcony. Watching everything. Evangeline felt her chest tighten painfully, because all that time, he had truly seen her. Another thought crossed the bond. Lower, more intimate. I started falling in love with you, long before I understood what was happening to me. She nearly lost her breath. Then it was her turn. The bond opened completely. Klaus immediately lifted his head when he felt her thoughts flowing through the connection. Her writing the letter by candlelight. I want you. Her hands trembling as she held the parchment. You left, and I already miss you. Her watching Vivian stand beside him during dinner. Jealousy burning inside while she pretended not to care. Her in the arena after the fight. Looking at him. I am completely lost. Klaus closed his eyes for a second as the emotions poured through him. Then came her final thought. Small, vulnerable, almost a whisper. I fell in love with you long before I admitted it to myself. The silence at the altar became heavy. They stood too close now, breathing the same air, sharing thoughts, memories, emotions, as though nothing remained between them anymore. Evangeline felt the energy building first, a warm current moving through the bond, down her neck, through her arms. Klaus felt it instantly. His wolf surged violently inside his chest. Mine. The word crashed through the bond with such force that she nearly stumbled. His golden eyes became too intense, too wild. Then he cupped her face with both hands before the entire kingdom, and bit her. The bond exploded. Energy tore through them like fire and storm at the same time. The entire hall felt it. The wolves of the royal guard immediately lowered their heads. Several nobles held their breath. Edmund closed his eyes for a brief second as if, at last, he could rest. Because this connection wasn't political. It was destiny. Evangeline felt his heart beating inside her own chest. She felt his love, his fear, his desperation at the thought of losing her. The way he had fought it for so long and failed miserably. And Klaus felt everything from her too. Every tear. Every time she had chosen him, even while trying to run from it. He leaned close to her ear and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. My wife. A gentle kiss brushed her cheek. My queen. His fingers caressed her face. My Luna. Then for the first time, his voice broke. Because some truths were too large even for an alpha king to carry without trembling. My home. His forehead rested against hers. My entire world.